All right, so briefly, what we did last time is we have a zombie character following us. It can take swipes at us. If we run away, it goes back to its idle state. What I'm thinking is we should create a heads up display to show like health damage as well as how many zombies we took care of. So inside of this, our TD folder, tab down folder, make a new folder called UI. And inside of here, go to user interface and let's create a widget blueprint and select user widget here. And then I'm going to name this W underscore TD for top down and then HUD because this will be a HUD. Because with these widgets, you can create other types of menus and stuff, not just a heads up display. Let's go ahead and double click this and open it up. And you can see here we have a canvas in which to draw out our display. Now, this is a little different than Unity in that, like, inside of Unity, you're inside of the editor or the interface when you're working on this. With here, inside of Unreal, you have an entire different interface. It's similar in that is that everything has to sit on a canvas. And so you could see here, if I type out canvas, there's a canvas panel here. And down here is our hierarchy, which shows everything that's inside of our panel. Again, a little bit different than Unity in that, you have the project tab and then you have the hierarchy that's inside of almost like you're looking inside the editor. So I'm going to grab my canvas panel, just drop it down here. Let's see, onto our HUD. And this little edge here, or this border, this represents actually the edges of our screen here. So if I click on that, you can see the pivot point, all of that other good stuff. So let's go ahead and begin by setting up like an image. So you can see under common, we have an option called image. I'm going to drag this out. And what I'd like to do is create an image for essentially for our main character. And then we'll have the health bar next to it. So we'll kind of move this up to the corner here. Let's go back to our essentially, well, we can go down to our content drawer here and then just go to your kid folder and then go to mesh. And then what we can do is let's do, actually, I think it might be cooler if we go to animations and we open up our kid blueprint. Let's see. Sorry, let's go to blueprints, kid, and let's open up our ABP kit and go to, let's see. You know what? Let's do let me close out of this zombie for a second. Our kid blueprint actually, and we'll go to our viewport here. So what I'm thinking is just what I might do is because I'm on a Mac, you can hit Control Shift S. I'm really just going to screenshot, which is I think Command Shift 4. I'm going to screenshot just his head from here, and then it'll save it off in the corner. And I'm just going to save this to the desktop. And I'm going to go back into my content drawer here, and inside of UI, I'm going to just click and create a new folder. Actually, we could just make a new folder called images. Let's see. Because we really should have, instead of our model, not just our models folder, we should have a folder called art, and then we should have all that stuff in there, just like we had level art up here. So let me go ahead and create a new folder here. Just call this 2D. And then inside of here, I'm going to import to the current folder. And I'm going to navigate to the image. So all I did in between it is I just renamed it Kid Sprite and I brought it in. I'm going to hit Save All. And so now I have it in here. So if we go back to our HUD here, you could see we could adjust this image size. And inside of here, we can actually use that sprite image that I brought in. Now, it could be tricky to figure out where you're supposed to insert the image. If you expand this under brush, you'll see image here. If we open our content drawer and we have this selected and we click this arrow here, it will just import, like it automatically find and insert that kid sprite image here. And so now we essentially created like a nice little heads up display image. If you have any friends who are 2D artists or you're a 2D artist yourself, it might be cool to paint over this, clear out the background, really make it pop because it's a little dark. I'm going to compile and save that as well. Next, let's go ahead and add a health bar, which I would, similar to Unity, I just kind of use the progress bar. And then you could just drag that out like this. All right, so let's go ahead and do the same thing for our zombie. So let's let's see, zombie model, and then our blueprint viewport. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of, he's sort of dark, but um, side of here. I mean, I could take him in the scene. Maybe it would probably be a better shot. Let's do that briefly. Oh, actually, I forgot he's already in our scene. So let me hit F to focus on this guy. And maybe I'll turn him around. Let's give him a little bit more light. And let's hit P to remove our nav mesh for a second and just kind of see. And then I'm going to hit G to exit game mode. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this. I should have maybe done this with my the kid model. Probably would have been more interesting, like a better view of the screenshot. Anyway, Control Shift 4, grab a little shot. Actually, I'm going to do one more, a little bit tighter on his head, like that. And then I'm just going to go to desktop and import that in. So I'll just pause the video and do that as well. So, but I'm going to do that all in my, let's see, my art or my 2D folder. I'm going to import in that headshot. So just import the current folder. All right, so here I have the zombie sprite, and inside our HUD, another way of doing it is you could just grab your content drawer and just drop it in. And that's another way of inserting an image. Just wanted to show you both ways. And we could add some text here. This is where you can kind of name your kid. So maybe we name him, I don't know. Let's be creative and name him Kid. We want to do a standard text, not a rich text. And then you can change the text here with text blocks. Let's see. The fill color here is blue, so I'll just keep the color the same. Actually, the sky is blue, so it might kind of, let's make his health will be kind of purple. Let's see. We'll see how it stands out. Maybe something like this. Green? Yeah, let's go with green. Kind of a generic. And you could also see here, like, let's see. Yeah, that's fine. And then under the kid text here, let's see. Make this green too. Got a little pop up there. Okay. So let's move this up and we'll see how big this is if this is too big on the screen. Let's shrink this guy down a little bit too so he matches it. And then I'm going to copy and paste this and then name this zombie. And this one, because he's a zombie, it'll be like a pinkish red. And then I'm going to copy and paste this and name this score. So let's delete this. Let's copy and paste it one more time when it's pink. Put a 0 in there. Just kind of make that a little bit bigger so we can see the number of zombies. And because these elements here are in the right corner, you want to make sure that your anchors for this is in the top right corner. So I'm going to select that, click there. Same thing with this one. And same thing with this one. And actually, I might move all of these over here just a little bit closer. Give us more screen space. There's there. Something like that. And under appearance here, under expand font out, and then take your font size up a little bit here. Something like this. And just kind of, let's see. And to center that as well. I'm going to center that text. No, I guess it's good where it was at. Just kind of maybe I'll pull this over a little bit. There we go. All right, so compile, save that. Now let's hook this up. Go to your BP kit here, your event graph, and let's see. So we have where we're showing our mouse cursor, we're getting our player controller, we're grabbing our context. Let me zoom in here a little bit so you can see it better. Drag this out and then just type out create and then widget. And it's this one under user interface. Select your class, and it's really going to be the W, and it's this guy right here, Td Hud, widget Td Hud. Let's compile and save that. And now that we've created the widget, we need to actually add it to the viewport. So let's type in viewport, add to viewport here. And now what this will do is after we create the widget, it'll actually show the widget in the viewport. Let's see if that shows up. If I press play here, you can see we've got our kid, we've got our zombie. And kid might need to be bigger. Same thing with zombie. And I don't think the placement is too bad. Because remember, this isn't your final view, like the way we're looking at it now. This is just kind of our in-game view. So let's jump back into our HUD for a second. And I'm just going to increase this font size for the kid. And then that was, what did I leave off? 50. And then the zombie should be 52. Or 50 as well, not 52. All right. I think that looks pretty good. This could be nudged up just a little bit. And I'm using my arrow keys here to nudge it around. Let me compile and save that. So this HUD or this widget that we're using here is actually a blueprint. So with that, that means that we actually can program logic, the logic to hook up our health bar here or what have you. And the way to do that is up in the right-hand corner here, you'll see something that goes from designer to graph. So if I click on graph here, you can see now we have a graph. And there's some options in here: event construct, event pre-construct, and event tick. And if you remember for a moment, if we go back to our BP kit here for a second, when we went to this create widget HUD here, we were almost constructing a widget here. So a lot of the logic that ties into every other graph, event graph, is the same as inside this widget here. We are still inside of an event graph. That's why they have an event tick here as well. So the way to access this variable as it displays inside the HUD actually isn't just to program the logic in here. We actually have to get a reference to our kid. And the reason for that is because where are we creating the widget that goes into our scene? Well, we're creating it into our blueprint kid here, and then we display it here. So we actually have to get a reference to our kid. And then from this kid, which is an object, then we can actually do things like update like the kid's health and stuff like that. So we have to create a variable. So I'm going to click on that. And the type is going to be an object. So let's type BP underscore kid. And you could see here, object types. This is the animation blueprint. So if I type kid here, let's see, we have here object type blueprint kid, and it's an object reference. So because we want to reference the game object itself, not individual class that's attached to it. So now if let me change this new variable name to kid here. So now this is actually a reference to that kid model. And if we want to be able to edit this in the interface, otherwise we can check this eye on, or we can click on this instance editable, and this will allow us to edit this outside of just this class. And something else we can do is if we check on expose on spawn here, we'll actually have a pin here that we can use to expose this variable. So if we go back into our HUD and we turn on expose on spawn, and we compile and save that, and now that'll give us access to this. All right, so let's go back in here and let's right click and refresh this, and then you'll be able to see that our kid is now we have an object reference to the kid that's connected to this HUD here. And because this pin is empty, we have to make sure that we populate it, and we're just going to I'm just going to type self in, and what this is going to do is just make sure that it's referencing the self, which is this BP kid that it's that the HUD is currently attached to. So let's compile and save that as well. All right, let's jump over to our HUD for a moment. Now, inside of our designer here, we have our health bar here. And if we expand fill and color opacity, what I want to do is I want to be able to affect our fill bar here so that um, when whatever the variable is, whenever our player is hit by the zombie, the health will go down. So if you look up here on our progress bar, we have this percent value. If I move this left and right with my mouse, you could see it exposes a certain percentage, right? 0.0 all the way to 1, 1 being completely full, and then all the way down to 0, which is essentially empty. So how do I essentially allow this to be connected to a variable? Well, Unreal has something called property bindings. And the way you create that is you click this little button here, and then you hit create binding. And what that'll do is allow us to add some logic to tie this to a variable, like an exposed variable that for instance, a float variable. And you can see here it's returning a float value. And as we're hit, we can actually subtract from that float variable, and then we can update this binding that will also update that percentage. And so you might be wondering, well, where's this get percent function that we just created? It's right up here under functions. So instead of get percent, this is a health bar. So we could name this get health bar. And let's make sure to compile and save that. And it actually specifies that this is a pure function, right? It's answering a question: do we have health or we don't, right? And so it's kind of nice that it specifies that. So how do we actually get the health? Well, we have a reference that we created of our kid model, so we can drag that out. We can get our kid, but we never created a variable inside of our kid here to hold the health. So all we have to do is down here inside of our variables is just hit plus here, create a new float value, and then we could name this player health. And then remember to compile and save that, because a lot of times it's where I get a lot of the questions is like, well, why isn't this working? It's really compiling and saving a lot. So if we go back to our HUD here and we compile and save this, now when I drag out my kid here and I type out player health, you can see we can get the player health. This is a default variable that we created. And there's, player state, there's all this other stuff. And that's the player health that we created. Now, if it helps to visualize this, a couple things we can do is you can name this a little bit differently, right? So I can go back here, instead of naming it player health, I can name this kid health or something. Kid player health. And then compile and save that. And then if it helps, go back into your HUD and you can see now it's called kid player health. Another thing is to double check, well, is this binding actually connected? If you go back to your designer here, you'll see it says get health bar. That is the function that we created, right? That's linked to it. That's our property binding. That's linking it here. And another way of doing this is if we go back to our BP kid here and we go to our kid player health variable and we set this to 0.5. And if you recall, our widget currently looks like this, where it's completely set to, our percent is set to 0. And we go in here and we press play, you can see it's set to 50%. The problem with this is we don't want to work in 0.1, 0.2. Like every time he hits, we want it to be in 10, 20, 5s. We want to be working in whole values. So an easy workaround for this is when we go into our HUD here, or let's see, our graph rather, what we can do is just simply divide this by 100. And then pin this in there. And now we can use whole values, right? So if we divide whatever that value is, the 0.1 point whatever by 100, and we compile and save this. Now when we go into our kid and we say, oh, we have 50% health or 50 here, we'll do 75. So you can see there's a clear distinction. And I compile and save this. You can see that we have 75% health. So let's stop this for a second and take a look at our HUD. And let's go back to our designer. Select your zombie number here, the 0. And what I want to do is create another property binding for the text here. And the name of this binding is going to get zombies cured. So you can see there's get text here. And we want to do the same thing where we grab our essentially our kid, drag it out, we get our kid, and then we want to create again another variable essentially that is going to reference the text, the number going up and down. Just go back to our BP kid here for a second. And let's create another variable called zombies cured. And remember to compile and save that. And then go back into our HUD here. And then zombies cured. And then this is a float value. What we want to do is, and actually I think we should just change this to an integer if we want to do with the whole numbers, but for now we can just grab this and then just click it, put it in there, and it automatically convert it to a string or text from there. So let's compile and save that too. So this should update with whatever value. So if we go inside of our BP kid here, and the number of zombies cured is like 10 or something, and let's save that. Now when I press play, you'll see 10 here. So it updated that value. And honestly, we do -1, -2. It doesn't matter if it's a float or a integer whole number. And I think this lesson, we did pretty good. Like we got our HUD set up, but the only thing is we don't have the actual values triggering when our player is hit or our zombies are cured. So let's go ahead and do that in the next lesson because we're already getting a little long here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this particular lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.